The late spring air in Charlotte, North Carolina, clung to the skin like a heavy promise, thick with the scent of blooming magnolias. At 32, Sarah Mitchell dragged her suitcase up the cracked steps of the two-story colonial she'd once called home. Her heart pounded, not from the weight of the luggage, but from the weight of everything else. She'd just buried Margaret, the elderly woman she'd cared for over a decade, and lost her job at the hospital in the same week. All she wanted was a moment to breathe. But when the door swung open, her mother, Diane, stood there, arms crossed, her face as welcoming as a locked gate. Back already? Diane's voice was flat, her hazel eyes scanning Sarah like she was a stranger. No hug. No, how are you holding up? Just a wall of indifference. Sarah stepped inside, the hardwood creaking under her sneakers. The living room felt alien, new curtains. A rearranged couch. Her old photos gone from the mantel. This was the house she'd helped save, pouring every paycheck from her teenage years into its mortgage to keep Diane from foreclosure. Yet it no longer felt like hers. Before she could speak, her ex-husband, Ethan, emerged from the kitchen, his smirk sharp enough to cut. Heard you're unemployed now, Sarah, he said, leaning against the doorway. We're not running a shelter here. His words landed like a slap, especially since Ethan still lived in the house Sarah had paid off rent-free. Over the speakerphone, his mother, Lorraine, chimed in from her condo in Raleigh. Tell her we're done carrying her weight. Sarah's throat tightened. I paid for this house, she said, her voice low but steady. I dropped out of college. Worked doubles at the diner and the clinic so you wouldn't lose it. Diane shrugged, her silver earrings glinting. That was then. Everyone's struggling now. Sarah, you'll figure it out. The dismissal stung worse than the words. Then Diane vanished into the hallway, returning with a suitcase. Sarah's packed and ready. You've been gone months, Diane said, avoiding eye contact. We needed to clear the space. Sarah's stomach dropped. Betrayal wasn't new, but this was a blade twisted slowly. That night, Diane didn't apologize. Instead, she threw a farewell dinner. A cruel mockery disguised as a send-off. Neighbors, cousins, and Ethan's cousin, Vanessa, a realtor with a fake smile and designer heels, filled the dining room. Diane raised her wine glass, her voice dripping with sarcasm. To Sarah, off to whatever's next. Hopefully not scrubbing someone else's floors. Laughter erupted. Vanessa leaned in, her perfume sharp. Maybe try live-in caregiving again. At least you'd have a bed. Another voice added, just don't end up in a tent downtown. Sarah's face burned, but she didn't flinch. She smiled, nodded, played the part she'd always played, keeping the peace. Inside, though, something snapped. They didn't know what she carried in her purse. Tucked in a hidden pocket was access to a trust fund worth $10 million. Left to her by Margaret, who'd loved her like a daughter. Margaret's will was clear. Everything, her estate, her investments, her legacy, belonged to Sarah. No one at that table suspected it. Not Diane, who'd once cried in gratitude when Sarah saved her from bankruptcy. Not Ethan, who'd coasted on her sacrifices. Not Lorraine, plotting from afar. As Sarah walked out, suitcase in hand, she didn't cry or beg. She smiled. At the curb, she opened her banking app, the zeros glowing like a vow she'd made to herself years ago. Instead of crashing on a friend's couch, Sarah checked into the penthouse suite at the Ritz-Carlton in downtown Charlotte. Morning light poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, gilding the marble floors, but she felt no warmth. Wrapped in a plush robe, sipping coffee that cost more than her old weekly grocery budget, she stared over the city skyline. This wasn't indulgence, it was strategy. Diane, Ethan, and Lorraine thought they'd broken her, cast her out like trash. They didn't know she'd spent years managing Margaret's multi-million-dollar estate, learning the language of wealth and power. They didn't know she was already moving pieces on a board they couldn't see. Back at the house, Diane was smug, thinking she'd won. Ethan joked about Sarah the freeloader over beers with his buddies. Lorraine, on her nightly Zoom call, plotted ways to ensure Sarah stayed down. None of them suspected that Sarah had quietly purchased 2 luxury condos in Uptown through a holding company. Mitchell Trust. Or that she'd acquired 51% of Ethan's financial advisory firm. The one he ran like his personal kingdom. Or that she was preparing to reclaim the house they'd thrown her out of. Her name still buried in its payment records. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Diane. Sent hours after the dinner. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Just move on. Sarah didn't reply. She poured another coffee, opened her laptop, and logged into the Trust's portal. A new request blinked. Internal audit. Mitchell Trust. This wasn't about flaunting wealth. It was about rewriting the story they'd forced on her. They thought she was cornered. A nobody they could erase. They were wrong. And soon, they'd learn just how wrong. The next morning, Sarah stood on the balcony of her suite. The city humming below. A memory surfaced, her at 16. Skipping lunch to slip Diane $10 for the electric bill. Diane had said, "Your stomach doesn't pay the lights." Sarah had believed her, thought sacrifice was love. At 20, she'd begged for a summer art program. Only for Diane to scoff. "We don't have money for your hobbies. Get a job." So she did, bussing tables while her friends went to camp. By 25, every raise went to the house. Diane never said thank you. Only, "That's what family does." Sarah had thought it was love. Now she saw it for what it was. A transaction. Back in her suite, another buzz. A bank alert. $5 withdrawn from a private account. Her pulse quickened. She hadn't touched it. The IP address. The timestamp. It all pointed to Diane's house. Years ago, Sarah had set up Diane's mobile banking for emergencies. Now, Diane had used it to steal. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was criminal. Sarah's fingers hovered over her phone. Then typed a single message to the family group chat. "What you're doing isn't just cruel. It's illegal. Stop now, or I'll hold you accountable." Ethan replied with a thumbs up emoji. Diane sent a laughing face. They thought she was bluffing. They'd learn soon enough. End of chapter 1. Sarah stands at a crossroads. Armed with a secret fortune and a resolve forged in betrayal. The family that cast her out has no idea what's coming. Will she use her power to destroy them? Or to rebuild herself? The game has just begun. The sun dipped low over Lake Norman, casting a golden sheen across the water that lapped gently at the shore. Sarah Mitchell, now 33, stood on the porch of her lake house. A mug of chamomile tea warming her hands. The Charlotte skyline was a distant memory, replaced by the rustle of tall grasses and the call of a lone heron skimming the horizon. This house, with its whitewashed walls and wide windows, wasn't just a purchase, it was a sanctuary. Once, Sarah had thought peace was something you earned through sacrifice. Now, she knew it was something you claimed. Months had passed since the war with her family. Diane, Ethan, and Lorraine had reached its peak. Sarah hadn't fought with tears or screams. Her weapons were sharper: legal documents, bank records, and the quiet power of truth. She'd reclaimed the colonial house she'd been thrown out of. Her name restored to the deed after a judge reviewed decades of her payments. She'd ousted Ethan from his own company. Her majority stake in Mitchell Trust turning his empire to dust. And she'd exposed Lorraine's smear campaign. Her livestream revealing the lies that painted Sarah as a gold-digging fraud. The video of Margaret's will, declaring Sarah her chosen daughter, had silenced the TikTok skits and Twitter threads. The world had watched, and the tide had turned. But victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like exhaustion. So, Sarah chose a different path. When Diane showed up at her hotel suite, broken and pleading, Sarah didn't slam the door. Diane's lipstick was gone, her shoulders slumped, her voice a whisper. "I've lost everything," she said. "The house. Ethan's gone. Lorraine won't speak to me." Sarah stood firm, hand on the doorknob, her heart steady. "I'm not your home anymore," she said softly. But she didn't turn Diane away empty-handed. From a side table, she handed her an envelope, a prepaid card with $5 and a list of senior living communities with support programs. "This covers 6 months," Sarah said. "After that, it's on you." Diane's fingers trembled as she took it, her lips parting but no words coming. Sarah didn't need them. She closed the door, not with anger, but with closure. Sarah left the city's noise behind. settling into her lake house where the days moved slower. She deleted her social media accounts, letting the world's chatter fade. No more trending hashtags. No more inbox flooded with hate or praise. She didn't need to explain herself anymore. Instead, she filled her mornings with the smell of dark roast coffee and the laughter of 6 local kids who came twice a week for piano lessons. They called her Miss Sarah, their small fingers fumbling over keys as she taught them chords and patience. One girl, Lily, all pigtails and curiosity, asked, "Why do you like piano so much?" Sarah smiled, her fingers brushing the ivory. "Because it can be sad and strong at the same time," she said. "Just like us." Lily nodded, her eyes bright, and Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. The lake house wasn't a trophy, it was a promise kept. Sarah had bought it with Margaret's inheritance. But she'd earned it through years of quiet resilience. She remembered the nights she'd stayed up, balancing Margaret's estate while working double shifts. The days she'd skipped meals to send Diane money for utilities. The years she believed love meant giving until she was empty. Now, she understood. Love started with herself. One evening, as the sky burned orange, Sarah sat under the massive oak tree in her yard, a glass jar in her hands. Inside was a letter she'd written, not to Diane, Ethan, or Lorraine, but to herself. "I forgive you," it read, "not because they deserve it, but because you do. You carried their weight too long. Now, you're free." She buried the jar where the roots were strongest, the earth cool against her fingers. It wasn't closure, it was release. Life became simple, not because the pain was gone, but because Sarah stopped carrying it. She cooked dinners without interruption, sipped coffee while it was still hot, and listened to the wind instead of worry. Sometimes, she thought of them. Lorraine faced federal charges for tax evasion, her influencer empire crumbling under scrutiny. Ethan's business license was revoked after a whistleblower exposed his shady deals. He couldn't work again until his 50s. Diane sent a postcard once. No return address. Just, "I hope you're well." "I'm sorry." Sarah didn't reply. Forgiveness didn't need a response. It needed peace. And she had that now. One morning, as Sarah sliced bananas for her friend Monica's homemade bread, Monica leaned on the counter, grinning. "People still talk. You know, the woman who bought 2 condos in one day and vanished." Sarah laughed, her first real laugh in months. "And I still sleep in one bed." Monica, a realtor who'd sold Sarah the condos, had become an unexpected friend. They'd bonded over coffee and stories. Not headlines. "Let them whisper," Sarah said. "I've got silence." And she meant it. Peace wasn't a viral moment or a courtroom win. It was the creak of her porch swing, the weight of a student's tiny hand in hers, the way the lake reflected the stars at night. Sarah's story wasn't just hers, it was a beacon. She knew others out there were fighting their own battles, betrayed by the people they loved most. So, she imagined speaking to them, her voice steady and warm. "If you're listening, know this. You don't need permission to walk away. Boundaries aren't betrayal, they're freedom. Choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. Maybe you've had to cut ties to protect your peace. Maybe you're standing at that edge, wondering if it's time. I see you. You're not alone." She'd ask them to share their stories, to drop a comment or just a number. 1 if her words hit home. 2 if they didn't, or their city if they felt like connecting. "Your story matters," she'd say, "and I'm here to listen." Sarah didn't need the world's applause anymore. She had the quiet of her lake house, the trust of her students, and the strength of a woman who'd rebuilt herself from ashes. The heron called again, its wings cutting through the dusk. Sarah closed the piano lid, her fingers lingering on the wood. The music didn't need to play forever. Sometimes, the silence was enough. End of chapter 2. Sarah's journey isn't about revenge, it's about redemption. She's found peace, but the world still watches. What's next for the woman who turned betrayal into freedom? Stay tuned.